Morning. My name is Ben O'Steen, and I've been asked to come here and talk about the Mechanical Curator, or the surprising adventures of Mechanical Curator over the past couple of months. It was quite surprising. It was an accident. We didn't really intend for things to go as they did. It had a few twists and turns. It went a lot more popular than we were thinking. And I haven't yet told you what the Mechanical Curator is. Let's start back how it began. You can all make your own wibbly wobbly effect. British Library Labs, funded last year by the Andrew K. Mellon Foundation. 2013 to ... We have an extension which is maybe formally kind of okay to say it's 2017 now. With Mahendra Mehe and me, Ben O'Steen. I'm the technical side, Mahendra's the managerial admin type person. And it's actually a really interesting project, and I don't get to say that very often. Our sole remit, and my paraphrasing, is we're there to create and explore new ways to get researchers working with digital content that already exists. So that's our job. We're trying to take the stuff that's technically accessible and make it actually accessible to researchers. So we are embedded in the digital research team. The keynote of this conference was done by Stella Wisdom, who you heard earlier. We're a small team, but we get stuff done. The British Library Labs, one of our key things at the beginning is to engage with researchers. There's no point in making things if we don't know what people actually want to use. Likewise, people don't know what they want to use until they've seen a few things. So it has to be done hand in hand with the researcher. So we get a lot of informal questions, such as, that's an interesting collection, all those books you got digitized. Can I have them? I'd like to look through all the scans, please. Can I see all the books that are just about travel? I don't mean the title, I mean somewhere in the text it mentions travel. Or I like distant reading. I've read about it, I don't know what it is, but I want to do it. Does the library offer that? We also have formal ways, more procedural ways, which are written into how the lab's bid is written, which is where we run a competition every year so far, 2013 and 2014. We've had the winners announced, and there's a flyer in your packs about who is going ahead with that. The process is a researcher or group of researchers will come to us with a pitch saying what the idea is, what research questions it asks and answers, hopefully, and what kind of help they might need and what they want to explore. What they win, more than anything else, is our time and effort, because you've seen how big the team is. There's not many of us. So all you have to do is break down the things that are useful to us, to the wider community, and to those researchers, and balance that as to what bids get shortlisted, and ultimately for a group of people we pulled together who have good insight into the community to what projects to take forward. They also get money, I've heard. I've not seen any, but then again I typically don't see any money. I'm just a worthy worker. So I do all the technical things on the back end for people to reuse. So in 2013 we had a couple of competition winners go forward. One was Peter Francois. His idea was that he didn't care so much about a single work. That researcher I mentioned about wanting to know all the books about travel, European travel, accounts, trips, that was Peter. He didn't care so much about a particular book talking about an account. He wanted to know what the general scope of travel was in European literature and in written accounts. And he was quite concerned about the difference between digital and physical. So I'm going to come back to the sample generator, which is something I built for him. But essentially the blue line is the physical holdings we have for books in the British Library. The red line is what we have digitized. So there is a huge discrepancy and also a big sample bias between the two sets because they're completely different lines. when you look in as a date distribution. So if you want to know about the 1860s, you might find that our physical holding is quite strong for certain areas, but our digitized copies, there's not a blip, there's not a similar rise in what's been digitized for that period. So if you look at only digital copies, you might be led to believe that there isn't a surge, as this shows. The other winner was Dan Norton, whose bid was titled Mixing the Library, Information Interaction and a DJ. He was interested in if a researcher can record a session with digital objects in the same way a DJ can. Having set lists, track playthroughs, and being able to mix those up in a time-based thing and replay them, edit them. And so we explored that area and how we can use British Library content. The fundamental takeaway from this project was none of the library systems could support any of those applications. Whatever I did for this, I had to extract from the library system and put into a separate system to be able to support this kind of reuse. So, if anything, it showed that the way that the library was distributing these kinds of images, files, sounds, wasn't reusable, even if the library for the license for these objects was in the public domain. So there was a technical block, even if there wasn't a legal block. So I've been talking to quite a few researchers over the past 7-8 months now. This is pretty much the unifying theme of what they come to us for. Give us everything. We've heard you got the Microsoft book collection, that's wonderful. How many books? Great. Can we send you hard drives? That typically is the way the exchanges go. We'd like to write you into a bid. Do you want to be a partner? We're going to ship you hard drives. This is actually quite depressing. This shows that most researchers who come, at least to the British Library, have already mentally written out the library as a partner for research. They've already taken that step of saying, the library is a provider, they're not going to take part in research, they're going to just be in our way. Just give us the stuff, we'll do it, and get on with our life. We are just fetching content for them. There are other themes, more interesting themes. So, one is people are bewildered, in a good sense, by the amount of content that returns from a search. They'll type in a search term, get 60,000 hits. They're also led to believe that there are actually 60,000 hits for that search, and they're relevant, which we can all probably agree that that's not the case at all. So there is some re-education there. But they all want tools to better understand what the shape of their results are. Not the words, not the first top 10, not the top 500. They want to know what the shape of it is and compare it to a search I did a week ago. What's the overlap to the search I did a week ago, which had different search terms? I ended up in different set of results. Can we see a union, an intersection, to use set terms? They also want to work on sweeps of stuff. So we've seen, and Owen pointed out in the lightning talk earlier, that the vast majority now, so I think there was a paper in 2007 by JISC, which said that 40% of all academic research starts at Google. And that was 2007, and it's only increased since. So the vast majority, we can probably say now, starts at the browser, at Google, which means that typically library queries end up being the item. I want to look at one thing. Whereas when you probe behind that, when people are actually doing research on the content, when they're trying to find out more information than just a book, they want to work on broad sweeps and they can't name a particular thing in there. So they wanted a tool to understand that. And the other thing was API? I don't care. Why should I care? Just give me the thing. Because it's a very common thing to be shown a puzzle to a certain kind of mindset and for that to be an enjoyable thing to solve. For some people in their research, it may be a puzzle, but it's just not going to do anything for them to solve it. So they're not going to chase after this, and they're not going to learn how to use an API unless they can see the actual benefit. And if we go, here's an API, no one's used it yet, we don't know, we think there's potential for research there, it's a very hard sell. So sometimes you have to bridge the gap between basic search and, say, the high-level RDF search, which we believe that digital humanity people will use, but I've yet to find any digital humanities people to use it. I've even found a number of computing students who have no idea what RDF is, any of the technologies or standards around it. And that was a few weeks ago. So, a challenge was born in that we wanted researchers to work with the files, but we didn't want them to work with APIs or having to learn new systems. So one way is, what happens when they have direct file access? Can people do useful things when given access to a shed load of files? Can we organize them in a sensible way without adding too much library convention that they'll have to learn? So we're trying to eat our own dog food. Unfortunately, it's a very biased test because I did it. And so it came out of a random meeting. We were trying to throw some ideas, and this came up. How has the depiction of faces changed in 19th century literature? As in the illustrations of them. Does it change by place or people? But also, how can we find them? So that sounds like a computational challenge. Finding faces. Most phones, most cameras now have face detection on them. So if they're in frame, they'll try and focus on all the faces and get as many in focus as possible. Some will not let you take a photo until everyone's smiling. So this kind of detection is a possible thing. So we've got a set of data, which we know there are faces in. We've got an algorithm that might work, even though it works on photographs, but we'll see what happens. And we can spot some faces, which is great. Was it a success? Not really. As you might expect, things trained for photographs don't really work on line drawings. But we had a lot of female faces found, which is of interest. The common differences were that female faces were often drawn in a more posed, more symmetrical fashion. More care was often taken. Male faces are often more caricatured, lopsided, asymmetrical, things that normally throw off the detection algorithm. And also beards, spectacles, hats, and ruffs, and all those kind of things were more likely to throw off the algorithm because it was trained on passport photos. So in the process of doing this, I had a little system set up that would randomly churn images it found into a web page on my screen. And people walking past me, behind me, would occasionally stop and look over my shoulder. There was something innately interesting about the images, even though they were plucked randomly without context. We were told that there were certain themes in the collection, certain subject themes, English literature, travel, but we weren't given any specifics really. But even so, we were surprised by what came out. And so we decided to put it on a Tumblr blog. There's a little bit more mechanical curatoriness behind it, but this is the beginnings of the Mechanical Curator. It digs through the Microsoft image collection, which we had digitized a while ago, which is 47,000 works, 65,000 volumes, 22 million pages, of which about 1.2 million have images on them. And it tries to pluck out images, and what it tries to do is, once it's picked out one image at random, it tries to make the next one visually similar to one it just picked out. And so you might see that there are some patterns to what it's picking out on the screen. I also made it get bored if it can't find a match within a certain amount, so it kind of does its own thing and is random and, well, I think the term euphemistically is serendipitous, but essentially it just gets bored, moves on, new line of thought. But it's been doing that for a good couple of months. A few hundred people follow it on Twitter as it's tweeting about what it's doing. You can click on any individual one. We've got links to the library. You can open it in the item viewer. You can download the PDF of the book it came from. You've got some starting material, and that started some research into what these books contain. It's thrown up some content in there we didn't really know. I don't think before we dug into it that we knew that there was quite a lot of geology in the books we had, quite high detailed ones as well. So that was an interesting outcome. And that was Mechanical Curator. That was the beginnings. We needed to name the Tumblr block. It needed a name because you need a web URL. So Mechanical Curator was bandied around and it stuck. And just for branding, we kept that name from then on. It was unplanned, unguided, but people liked it. People enjoyed this way of interacting. It didn't solve a research question that we were posed, but it showed a pattern for access that wasn't going to a catalogue and looking for a specific thing. It was throwing up things that would start that research process. They go, oh, this is an interesting thing that's been in this book. I'll now chase that line. And there were a few blogs that started because of what was coming up. One found a hexagonal map of London and started a whole blog on exploring different ways of representing maps in artistic means. So I mentioned this before, that everything was in theory accessible, in that you can go to the item viewer from the catalogue. You can get the PDF, and you can do so ever since about a year after the digitization process stopped, and I think it was available from about 2010. So I didn't have to be located in the British Library to do it. Technically I could have done it outside. However, the way that the catalogue lets you search for digital items, the way that you can even find any of these items, means that it was utterly impractical for anyone to do it without insider knowledge. In this case, we took all the files from our digital library system, the way we hold all our files, and took a copy to a network storage box that sits on a desk nearby to us. So no APIs, none of that, just grab all the files from the system because it was the best way, and it still is pretty much the only way to get a lot of these files. So hopping back to the sample generator for a second. So this is trying to show the chasm between what is available in print and available digitally. I know that travel is well accounted for. So this is already known that the digitization process focused on the travel section for this particular period. And even though in, say, 1830, we've got 226 print books, for that same year, we have 10 digitized. I've been told a figure of 2.7% digitized, which is not a great figure, but there is a lot of stuff. That's fairly defensible. It's a hard thing to do with this level of content. So even though the digital content is not any way representative of what we have, it's still nowhere near accessible as it could be. So we've already got the license checked on this content. Microsoft came in, scanned in all these books, backed out of Microsoft Book Search. However, when they did so, they actually very kindly tore up the contract, so to speak. They said, here are the files, we're disavowing any ownership of these files, they're yours. And so we have public domain books scanned in for a process which the person who scanned it in, even for any interpretation of law, has disavowed any rights over it, meant that we could do what we like with these files, which is very good. Mechanical Curator Twitter had a few hundred followers. People might be interested in seeing all the images rather than one every hour. So we put it on Flickr. So on Flickr there are 1 million and, well, originally 1,019,000 images uploaded. Within the first 4 days we got 55 million views. And the kicker is that obviously these images were extracted from books, but we only had metadata about the book they were from. We had nothing about what the image was. Some might say that's a gamble. I did talk to various people who had done similar work in putting up things that could be offensive or risque or things like that. And the people I've talked to have been, we prepared a statement, no one's ever complained. We're still in that same situation where we've put up this. We know that there is racially insensitive stuff on there because it's 19th century and travel accounts to the, well, Africa and the, let me see, there are some really offensive titles, probably doesn't bear repeating. And that worried me actually quite a bit before the thing. You may notice on screen there is a bunch of sets which have titles which have meaning. So wildlife, technology, there's also portraits, maps. These are all things that have been tagged by people on Flickr. We haven't done, I haven't done that much on there comparatively. We've got about 90,000 tags added, which means that we now have interesting sets of tags from things like, not maps, but we'll have a few of those. But map, particularly like the lion one. Got about 5,000 or so portraits, which in my opinion is absolutely prime for adding to Wikimedia Commons, for enhancing Wikipedia pages for those people if they're notable, because these are all public domain images. It's very free to add them. Plus a lot of them do have captions, even if it's in a different script or language. It's still fairly readable even if your only native tongue is English. So the response was very immediate. We weren't really expecting. We had gone from a situation of putting up a few things which spun off a few researchers to go and look into a few books, a few hundred on Mechanical Curator Twitter feed, to several tens of millions of views in days, and written about in a number of publications. And so impact often comes up. How do we trace the impact of this release? Should we track? Because for all of this, we've not asked for any real attribution on the license. It's all been public domain, CC0. It would be nice if you gave us attribution, but you don't have to. The image on screen here is from an artist who we didn't ask money for, and he didn't have to come to us and fill in the 4 or 5 page form and get a reader's card to get certain images for, I forget what the going cost is per image. He was able to browse it over Christmas and create artworks, which at the Burning Man festival is now going to be the centerpiece. So he is doing a large installation at the Burning Man festival in the middle of the desert, round eventually a Burning Man, which will be large, trying to find a suitable image there, which will be large, freestanding, illuminated pieces of art based on the images we uploaded. And that was only uploaded December. So this is quite rapid turnover and quite good impact. It doesn't bring any money into the library. So that becomes harder to justify because people are always chasing direct forms of income from the library. An easy question to reply with, which is not fair, I know, is how much money do your imaging services actually provide over and above their overhead? Because from the ones that I've seen and interacted with and the ones in certain institutions, the level of bureaucracy and struggle it is to get anything through them means that there's a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted money. Do they actually make money that's making it worth not putting things out for free and making a much more streamlined process? Because one of the things we also want to do is encourage creativity. So this is another artist who took the images and has created a video where he's made them intriguing, interesting, cut up and animated. Would this have been possible if you had to go in through an imaging services request form, specify a page of the book, pay his money, then find out the image is actually not the one he wanted? You can barely browse normally, so this is a way of enabling creativity. And it's very hard to disentangle creativity from research. Because research that is obvious is not research, it's just drudgery. Research actually has a meaning, it's novel and creative. And sometimes distinguishing between hard science and art, there's no point in doing that. You might just leave them coupled. Sometimes you get surprising things. You get artworks that you would never know come into existence. And sometimes the techniques required to create art like this can be applied in all manner of other ways. In this case, it could be an animation student who's learning new techniques because of the in this case, putting out the release has an indirect benefit to everyone manipulating large amounts of files to examining what a 19th century illustration actually looks like. Print and London print, and also the awfulness of something. Sorry, looking at the time, cut that off. But the point is to try to always look for a direct result may not be a solid way to move forward. It has to be hand in hand with researchers and artists, because sometimes you can't draw the line between the two of them. Other random uses? These are some Christmas tags I did for Christmas, just using random images. And I printed some on a blanket just to show it's possible. Other people have been doing machine learning techniques on it, so that the finding faces I alluded to earlier, someone else has done it far better than I did. He found all the most colourful faces in the set and made an artwork with them. We've also got work with the TSP Digital Innovation Contest to try and track down how public domain works are used after the fact, because there's no sense in putting up barriers saying please sign up before they've even done anything. We're trying to work with gamification, and we've also had a fantastic response from Wikimedia Commons community, who have built synoptic indexes for the books and done a lot of the groundwork in deduplication, and also what plates are present in which books and which uses they can find in Wikipedia itself. There are tutorials. There have been collaborations with colleagues which wouldn't have come about otherwise. Education being used in schools and trying to be packaged up into different mechanisms for use in secondary primary schools in England and also in the US. People like to talk about image views. I prefer the stat on the bottom, which is getting every image viewed at least once, which we managed to do at the beginning of March. And we're now just about to get to the point where every image has been viewed at least 5 times. So it's not huge, but for 1 million and so images, getting everything viewed 5 times is a fair amount. So accessibility is great. Can we make it more useful? Because obviously we're beholden to Flickr on this one. Can we make it more useful? I'd just like to quickly mention the Microsoft Azure for Research Award, which we were given just at the end of last year, which enabled us to use their Azure platform for compute and storage, and we've put up a lot of our content there. In fact, I've got all the OCR text, all the images, metadata about all the placement is all up there. We're also working with UCL and Microsoft and a group of big data computer science students who have been given access to all this, and we're working with them to build something, a foundation, which we hope will soften the blow to normal researchers coming in to use the content. So that it's actually a combination of computer science students and digital humanists come together to decide and work out a platform, a way of sharing, a way of investigating, exploring these files in a way that's better than just giving them the files. Finally, we're also playing with things. So if you have a lot of crowdsourced tags, how do you check that those crowdsourced tags are any good? I'm working on a way with borrowing this game mechanic of wits and wages, which is where you ask a question. In this case, it'll be, here's an image. Tell us what's in the image. And there'll be a group of 6, 7, 8 people, depending on who's logged in at any one time, and they'll answer words. And then all the words will be displayed, and then you'll have to bet with your big bet and your small bet. This is the best word, and this is the second best word. And that way, not only do you get the submissions for the tag, but you get an overall group think about which one is actually best. And then you get scored based on that, and it goes on. So that combines getting the information and also having some validation at the same time in a playful manner, because Wits and Wages is a fun party game anyway. Talking about gamification, slight tangent, I'm leaving it in the slides. I recommend people see this to understand different ways of making gamification useful, because you can't just slap a game system in, it has to be a fun game in the first place. In summary, Mechanical Curator, still going, still tweeting, we've got Flickr, we're experimenting with the big data stuff and more direct access. We're looking for any researchers to come along and help guide what we're doing. And the fundamental thing is to take the content to where people go. And that changes, hopefully not weekly, but maybe on a monthly basis. Flickr was an easy way to get it into Google, because going through the library services manner would have taken, we were told, 3 to 4 years to have any change. So Flickr was cheap and effective. We're looking at Azure and other cloud services to do it again, and in a year's time we might pick a completely different thing. There is no one place for these files, it's going to be wherever it's most useful. So I'm going to leave you with one final experiment, because that's what British Library Labs is all about. This came up last night. What should a final slide in a talk be? So this was chastised, and so that's one. There was also, thank you for your time, autographs and reception, that came up. There was also this. And then the intentionally left blank slide, or maybe just ending it with some useful details. Okay, thank you, and if you have any questions, there may be time now, but sorry.
We are a bit over time, but just 1 or 2 questions. No? Then we'll...
Thanks very much, Ben. I'm very impressed. And just, you mentioned in the beginning that researchers view the library as just standing in the way, and you managed to break through this. So what's your advice for us other, for instance, academic libraries to, how do you do that? Do you start as a guerrilla or what?
Well, I think the first thing is to say that, saying to the researcher that things are possible, and to actively ask them what they want, because very often once they ask you for all the files and you show them, their question changes, because it starts a dialogue. It starts that thing of, oh, the library isn't just an output mechanism. There is a dialogue that could be established. It can respond to what I want. We've had a bit of fortune in that British Library Labs, we can say we're a project. We're associated with the library, we're on the side. We can have that sort of brand distance, to use a marketing term, from the core processes to be able to experiment. We write on the front page of our wiki, we're here to experiment with content. We're here to help you experiment with content. And that's a good message to get out. And that doesn't need a separate project, but it might need a separate brand. just to help break through any previous misconception.